So we all want to make sure that our children thrive when they go to school, and we want them to have their best life. So if you are a parent and you are concerned about your child, your preschooler, in fact, their best life and their future ahead, then this is a conversation that you definitely need to listen to, because we found that the survey Thrive by 5 Index of 2024 that was done found that half of South Africans' children never get that chance to thrive. They did the survey about 5,000 children, 4-year-olds, across 1,388 early learning programs. And there were some sobering and staggering and shocking findings. And I'm discussing that this morning with Basil Manuel. He's the executive director of NAPTOSA. And if I sound nasal and I sound sick, it is because I am. But that will not prevent me from having this very important discussion. And I think also, Basil, what we should do is do a follow-up where we speak to parents, because I would love to hear parents' concerns regarding this. Good morning. Welcome to Amplify with Lynette. Basil, thanks for your time. Your response as NAPTOSA when you saw some of these findings?
Lynette, good morning and thanks for having me, and good morning to everybody who will listen to this. At first, it may surprise you that we are not surprised, simply because given the informal nature of our preschooling, or what we call ECCE now, early childhood care and education, it's been informal up to now. And with informality comes a lack of direction, comes a lack of assistance, and all the other things that just don't happen in the informal sector. So we are not surprised that there are really good ones and there are really bad ones and a lot in between. However, that doesn't mean we are not concerned about it. Not being surprised and not being concerned are very different. We are concerned because this does mean that, as you said, a large number of our children are going to start school, where every parent has a hope and a dream of their child achieving, but they're going to start with a deficit. And that is the importance of this survey, that we recognize the deficits, and now we need to start planning around them. How do we fix them? Because that being the most important outcome that must come from this.
Before we continue discussing the key findings, have you in the past seen where parents, for example, said, but these are the gaps that we see, these are the concerns that we experience. We want to enroll our children, but we find there isn't any structure, for example, or the teachers are people that love kids, but they have no formal training, and we're a bit concerned that our money is keeping these programs or these creches afloat?
It's a two-edged sword, Lynette. Consider this first before I answer that directly, that these are the same people that actually kept the wheels of the economy turning by looking after our children and allowing us to go to work. So irrespective of the quality at first, they have played a really important role in the economy of the country and in the socio-economic lives of everybody. And that is the acknowledgement I need to give. At the same time, as a former principal of a primary school, where I firsthand had to accept children into grade 1, it was obvious when a child had been to a preschool system, had managed to get into a grade R class, and the child who was looked after by granny, or just never was in anything either informal or not, because we have three categories: those that have been in formal structures, those that are not in formal structures, and of course, those that are in poorly organized formal structures. And I can tell you that parents would come with their children and they would have already recognized whether good had happened. They already recognized that there were deficits, because in the normal nature of us as people, we compare our children to each other in our own communities, in our streets, with our relatives. And parents do that. And so they know immediately when there is a deficit, but sometimes they had no choices. And it is all about choices as well that these results reflect on too.
So let's tackle the first one. Too few children are on track, because that's one of the points that you also
Yeah.
raised. Talk me
Lynette,
through that.
only 42% of the kids tested. And let's talk about the sample first of all. It's a huge sample. As any scholar would tell you, that research never covers such a wide sample. 5,000 kids, 1,388 early learning centers. And that says to you that this is an exceptional document. It's exceptional findings. Don't worry about whether you like them or not. They prove themselves to be authentic because of the size of the survey. And that's the first part. So with 42% only on track, where we safely say they are school ready. On track simply means, in simple speak, these children are school ready. They are ready to enter into grade 1 and they will succeed.
So
What it
sorry,
means is,
before, yeah, what do you describe as school ready? Because
yeah,
some parents would say, "Oh, my child is cute; they can read, or they know already what 1+1 is," and in their minds, that qualifies as school ready. So give us an
sure.
explanation how educators view school readiness.
School readiness has many, many elements to it. First of all, it is not about reading, because children should not be taught too early to do that. They need other things so that it's a laddered approach. There are building blocks. And when we talk school readiness, it is about socialization first. They can socialize with other children. They know how to go to the bathroom. They can do the simple things like tying a shoelace, etc. They identify shapes. They starting to identify colors. But the most important aspect is that they begin to become numerate. By that I mean they're starting to identify numbers of things. I have a lot, I have a little, and then even the numbers start coming. And you know that from your own family, people or children or whatever, that this is how we start recognizing. And this is when parents get very proud and say, my child can count. And that's part of it. But it's not only that. And then, of course, this very important aspect of respect and sharing and all that, all part of socialization. So, school ready, can I look after my own clothes? Can I button my shirt
My
or
shirt.
my safari suit, whatever it is that you will be wearing? So I'm touching on a few of the things. There are also then those motor skills. Now, motor skills are these things that we use our hands for, hand-eye coordination, can we catch a ball, etc. And parents who play games with their children, like soccer, like a bit of rugby, and children learn to catch. That's all developmental. It starts developing the fine motor skills, even such as threading things, etc. Now, all that gets done as part of school readiness. So when the child gets into a class, socialization says, oh, I'm going to be sitting next to others. Can I speak with them? Am I confident that I can ask to go to the bathroom? Or, that I won't just sit and wet myself because I haven't been taught those things. So
Yes.
school readiness, being on track, means a lot of things. But there are formal things like language, like numeracy and so on, that informally are fed into this. Remember, learning is primarily by play at this stage.
Mm. I hear you.
So
I hear you.
coming back to the point of so few being ready for that, what it says is that in the informal sector, even though we've kept children busy, just singing and sleeping can't have children school ready by a particular time. And we know, with all good intentions, these are
Yes.
fantastic people who have cared for our children, who've looked after our children, seen that they're safe. So they have played a part, but it is limited.
Hear you. I hear you. There's the reference to the gender inequality. and that the gaps between the way girls learn seemingly faster and the way boys learn, that is widening.
Lynette, it's an important point that goes well beyond the Thrive by Five. And I will sort of just throw something in a little later. But yes, the gender equality gaps are concerning because the figures are that 48% of girls would be ready as compared to about 37% of boys. And you can see the gap. But unfortunately, that gap grows. It doesn't become smaller.
Mm.
And if we look, I'll come back to the Thrive by Five in a second. If you look later in life, who are the children that get disengaged quickest, that start playing truant earliest, that eventually drop out in numbers that are already concerning us? It's the boys. And you don't need to be a scientist to figure this out. Walk down the street and see who's sitting on our street corners. It is
Absolutely.
primarily the boy child. And these are the kids that eventually become problems in the community, etc. And here's the thing I need to say about that. We need to be doing something about boys, not at the expense of girls, and it's not because of the girl child. But girls are, by their very nature, far more attentive. And so, and then boys far more playful. It's how it works. But unless we pay attention to that, we leave the boy child behind. So the girl child, we need to develop more, because not all girl children are doing well, because there are other things that detract from this, but there are certainly gender inequalities which become more pronounced later.
And we can talk about some of the suggestions that you have spoken about, how to either remedy or how to address this very quickly. If you've only joined us now, let me just briefly give you context. If I'm short of breath, it's because I'm recovering from a cold. Still not 100%, but please indulge me. We're talking about the Thrive by Five index. It was done by last year, 2024, and FNB graciously made sure that over 5,000 children of 4-year-olds across 1,388 early learning programs were surveyed in this discussion, and they looked at who is thriving and what their possibilities going forward are. And two of the things we've discussed so far, two of the findings are that too few children are on track. We've spoken about 48% of the girls that were surveyed compared to 37% of boys are really thriving and also ready, school ready, the term that Basil Manuel mentioned earlier on. There are some others as well, and he will, as executive director of NOPTOSA, talk about what they suggest. But we want to do a follow-up conversation, not necessarily today, and when we speak to parents, what they have seen and what their frustrations have been. This is mainly testing and chatting and monitoring 4-year-olds. Let's not forget that. So the biggest concern, and I think it's not just when we look at 4-year-olds or those who need to enter grade R or early development, we can see it in primary school, we see it in high school. The fact that access and food poverty has a major impact on the development of the child, whether they are girls or boys or wherever they are.
Lynette, absolutely. If I can come in there, just to finish the boy child, we also need to see that the programs we have appeal to the different natures of children. And in a poverty-stricken area where there are only basics, the stimuli material will not be there. And that further enhances the boy child falling behind. But to look at the impact of poverty and how it impacts on gender and so on, we must remember that we have a very unequal society, and that there are some people that are flying very high and that there are others that are eking out a living. And when I say eking out a living, I mean it in the truest sense of the word. Every day is a battle to put a little bit on the table. How does that parent manage to get a child into an early learning program. It's nigh impossible if there are any costs involved. And so the choices are forced on parents. It is not that the parents make these choices because they don't want their children to be there. Those that manage to send them to centers that are subsidized, they too still find it difficult because schools demand certain things. And that is why one of the findings and one of the recommendations is we have to go back to the drawing board about the funding of early learning programs. If we want our children to be school ready, we've got to stop only looking at matrics and spending a fortune on matrics where teachers are teaching around the clock, etc. And then we neglect the foundation, when fixing the foundation would mean that what is happening at the top will automatically improve. And that is the big story that has to come out of here, is that more energy needs to be spent at the bottom. And this report starts showing us that this has now become an absolute necessity.
Basil, wasn't there a system in place where if you ran a program or a center, that you could apply for some funding, and through that you were able to either pay staff, I don't know, but it seems like it needed to be enough to pay staff and to feed the children, operational funds, if you will.
Lynette, like with so many things in our country, it's not evenly applied, first of all. And because these are provincially based programs and sometimes even municipally based programs, you find that there have been different criteria and various things applied that hasn't made it as successful as the theory sounds. And then, of course, the programs also demanded that there were certain criteria that had to be met in terms of space, in terms of wherever these children would be and what you're going to present, etc. And health issues, which are important. And in this program, we also say that the health of children must be tied to their education. And unfortunately, sometimes people didn't bother to apply for these because they weren't sure whether that ticking box would match what they have. And yet they were still doing what they needed to do. So yes, it has been there. No, it has not been universally applied. In fact, I think in certain areas, it may have even worked better in your better resourced areas because they had that already.
What concerns me is that, again, it comes to accountability. How did we not notice that there were groups of children being left behind prior to the survey?
Lynette, just for the correctness of information, this is the second time the survey is being done. Okay, 3 years ago, it was done for the first time, and that was the big wake-up call. And you would have seen that even the political parties started including early learning, early childhood care and education in their program. This also thrusts the ruling party into talking about formalizing grade R and also looking at the early learning years. Now, so it's had a positive impact. So it hasn't been that people haven't noticed. Sometimes it has been about simply not, according to government, being able to afford to do this. And we've put affordability in front, and our children have suffered as a result of this, where we spent money on other things. I subscribe to the view that it's not a shortage of money. It's money not being spent in the right places and on the right programs. So we have noticed this. We've seen that, and the impact comes into reading. And Lynette, in ordinary school, I don't care where the school is, whether it's well-heeled or not, if you enter a school and you are in a grade 3 or a grade 4 class, you will know immediately if there if there is any reading material at home. It shows immediately. And if the school can't provide reading material for children to take home, that child is never moving beyond where they are. And don't believe for 1 minute that your well-heeled more wealthier people are doing the reading.
Yeah.
It takes a parent to do that. It doesn't take money. And
True.
that's where it all falls down. So even in your wealthier areas, when parents don't do the little things, things fall down. Where schools can't afford to send a reader home because they're trying to protect this reader, keeping it because it's got to last so many years, it
Mm.
disadvantages the child.
I hear you. And then there's the other argument where parents, some parents, have abdicated their role and has left it to the teachers or um, the carers at these centers because I'm paying you, you look after my child, you do what I can't do because I have to go work, which is also understandable, which is also the reality.
Our reality is that some parents don't even see their children. And when I say see, I'm talking about quality time. They work, they get home from work at an hour when the children are just about ready to go to bed. It takes a bit of eating and then go off to bed. And then they leave before those children are even dressed for school. And that is economics and the difficulty of limited incomes, etc., and the distances people live away from where they work. So we can throw stones at our parents, and sometimes we need to, but there are some realities that you have to consider when you look at this. So the school becomes so important, Lynette. And that is
Mm.
why we are saying as a teacher union that we've got to pay more attention to the quality of the teacher. With the better quality teacher, with a teacher with more resources, it does relieve, not take away the responsibility, relieve the parent who, with the best intention in the world, will not be able to do this. And our children are better off for it. So for us, it is things like, what are we doing in terms of professional development? Honestly, not enough. We have been, our focus has been higher up. Our eyes were falling on grade one, two, three, but not lower down. Now we've got to look lower down, and we've got to see how do we, through professional development, leave teachers, even that gogo there, who has been singing the whole day, etc., with some skills, because we can teach them. We also need to see that the training our teachers are getting is of a quality, is of a standard that it equips them for the different types of areas that they are going to enter into. Because
Mm.
if you are entering into the poorest of the poor, your training has to have readied you for that.
Absolutely.
It can't be
Absolutely.
one size fits all.
If you
Because
cannot
what you're going to
identify,
encounter,
if you can't
absolutely,
identify
what you're
with the
going to,
child,
my point exactly. I don't need to add more to that. And training becomes so important. So we are busy as another one of the immediate tasks is reviewing the training teachers are getting, the people that are now training, and there is quite a large number of people training for early childhood care and education, which is fantastic. It has to do with the economy, it has to do with the difficulty of finding a job, but let's then make them good people to stand in front of those kids.
I'm whilst you are talking, I'm making notes here because I think this is a bigger conversation. I said earlier that we need to get some parents involved, but I think we need to actually dedicate a show where we talk only to teachers and ask them if they feel that their training is adequate. They're jostling to get positions, but we see the world changing. We see the way of learning changing, the way of work changing, and how many of our kids at our current schools are equipped, and how many of our teachers are specialists to equip them for the future. The way of learning has changed dramatically from the day that you were a primary school teacher, from the day that I was at primary school. And we even have to adapt to that. But what is the in the broader educational system? What's happening there? So I take your point and thank you that we can talk about that. Some of the other things that you highlighted as a union, a teachers union, was stunting happening. For those that aren't familiar with the term because of where they live and maybe the comfort. Let's talk about that and then try and focus on the recommendations that you've made going forward.
Lynette, it's about poverty. It's about the impact of food, and of course, not just quantity of food, but the right types of food, and the impact it has on the physical being of a child. And the physical being then also impacts on the child's performance generally. Now, what one of the findings showed is that there are far more children stunted in growth. In other words, they're not the right size for their age, considering all the other physiological factors. Because we are all different. Some are tall, some are short, etc. But even if you're the shortest type of person, you have to have reached certain milestones. And you know that yellow card that the clinics used to have, and that would show where
They
you need
still
to
have.
be, etc. Those are
Yes.
extremely important and valuable
Mm.
documents, because it does start showing whether the child is in fact getting the following the correct diet. Now, as soon as you say diet, you have to think about affordability. Can our
Yes.
people afford to do this? So what does that mean? That's not going to change overnight. It's not a light switch that we can switch on and off. But the schools can come in and assist with this. And we've had this nutrition program at schools, and it is doing wonderful work. I can tell you the number of children that are getting a full meal because of that. And it has changed the lives of countless children who would otherwise not have enough. We've got to move that into these early learning centers as well. We've got to ensure that those children also eat, that those children are getting the balanced meal. It's not happening at the moment, but that is what we have to ensure. And that is what we are also pushing for now, is to say, this has cost a government a lot of money. We know that. But when Mandela started this, it was started because even then it was recognized that it is a necessity. But once again, we looked up, we didn't look down at where the most basic needs are. And that is what we must do. So stunting is then the result of it. It doesn't mean that these children don't reach the milestones eventually, but it means they're slower to reach the milestones, and
Slower.
that impacts on their ability to do certain things. For example, if you are smaller than your age suggests you should be, your motor skills are not as developed. Those tactile things where you can touch and thread and tie a button, etc., doesn't happen at the right age. And those are the things that then keep children back. And that is what makes them less ready than they ought to be.
You say a simple thing where nobody notices that the child needs glasses, that they have poor eyesight, because nobody is observant enough or engages enough with a child to notice. But this child will thrive if they can actually just see what's happening on the board.
Point. And of course, we believe social development hasn't really done what it could have done. Because remember,
True.
this is the other thing that doesn't always gel. We have the education department on the one side, and we have the Department of Social Development, and then women and children. And unless these are singing from the proverbial same hymn book, it is not going to work, because the silo effect then comes in, where I'm running with a program because it is noticed. But in fact, I need you to run with my program, because working together, we will achieve more. And so social development hasn't quite come to the party. And maybe it is because we haven't welcomed them enough into the education space. And maybe that should not be in social
Mm.
development, it should be in education. So
Education.
these are different debates. But the bottom line is they haven't worked together sufficiently.
So, if you've only joined us now and you saw me blowing my nose earlier, I am in recovery. I have a cold. I'm still not 100%, but I really felt it was important that Basil and I speak about this. So, sorry for the being short of breath and blowing my nose. And you would see me sipping. It's actually coffee, nothing stronger. No medicines yet. We're speaking to Basil Manuel. He is the executive director of NAPTOSA. We're talking about the Thrive by 5 Index of 2024. Basil said earlier it's the second time that this has been done, 3 years prior. it was done. And we were looking at, with the sponsorship, it seems, of FNB, they looked at 5,000 children, 4-year-olds, across 1,388 early learning programs to discover and to look at what has changed, if at all, what still needs to happen in terms of development, growth, school readiness for your child, if you have a child that needs to go into grade R. There have been so many comments and disparities over the years. Some of the key findings of this particular one featured and spoke about stunting. Basil just touched on it. Spoke about poverty that amplifies the disadvantages. We spoke about gender inequality, boys struggling, and that also, which was quite interesting that you said, because I do think there is this gap that there's not enough programs that stimulate boys, and they get all antsy and fidgety, and then we say, no, they must suffer from some kind of illness or
ADHD.
disease or ADHD. We just brand them. We brand them
Rebrand.
there, but we don't look at, okay, so maybe what we are offering isn't stimulating or engaging enough for them. So our focus does need to change.
Yes, it does. But I do want to mention one thing, Lynette, where the boys are doing better, where the children in poorer areas are doing better. And you'd be amazed that it is in our gross motor skills. Look, there are 5 domains which have been looked at, and gross motor skills is one. Because boys run more and they play soccer and they play rugby and all that. And that does make them more developed than children in wealthier areas, by the way. Because our children in the poor areas are climbing the trees and they're falling out of the trees and they're doing all the things that drive mothers crazy. But it has a positive spin to it. And of course, boys are far more active in that respect. And so you would find that in that area, boys are doing better than girls. That's the only area. And secondly, that in your poorer early learning programs, the boys there are outstripping the girls, but also outstripping the wealthier children that are a little more protected, and they have all the helmets on and they have all these things so that they don't get scratched and what have you. But I'm not saying don't use that. What I am saying is that there is a positive in letting children get dirty, letting children roll in the mud and do the things that actually builds resistance to other things. So in that, just to mention, the fine motor skills, of course, that's are completely different. And then emerging numeracy and language. And that's where you start seeing the difference between the rich and the poor suddenly bursting forth. And of course, cognition. When it comes to understanding patterns, when it comes to identifying just from a picture, a story, these are some of the things that we do. And the gap just widens and widens. And then, of course, literacy and language. So in those 5 domains, on the one only do we see boys at the top, and we see the poorer kids doing equally or better. And we have to, Lynette, it is about money. It is about the use of public funds. Let me just stress public funds, because sometimes we see how much gets squandered on shocking things. Whilst, when I was a principal of a school, we used to assist a preschool in a very impoverished area with food. We used to give them rice and beans and so on. And do you know what a little we needed to give to ensure that those children ate? It's a crying shame that every other school or community can't support these little children, because they don't eat a lot. They don't need millions. And those billions we sometimes talk about, one of them would be able to feed a province's children. That is the tragedy. We have to look at strengthening the flow of money, and of course also from the private sector. The private sector is stretched to the dizzy limit, because they too, everybody is looking for assistance. But the private sector will help if they see the flow of government money being efficiently and effectively used where it should be used.
When one can see this is what it looked like before, this is what with our interventions it looks like now. Can I also just for a moment, just before we end our discussion, let's quickly talk about South Africans, the tendency we have to compare ourselves to others. I don't know if you've seen these videos where we look at all the opportunities that the children in China, for example, they are preschoolers, they are baking, they are sewing, they are weaving, they are cleaning house, making beds, working with leather, and we sit and think, whoa, wow, children, you know this videos. I've seen it countless times. We're talking about 3-year-olds, right? And it's like they are a little factory already. They can start a business tomorrow because it's skills transference.
Lynette, yes, I know the videos, and I've lived part of that life. I was in Denmark for an extended period of time as a very young teacher, more than 30 years ago. And you know that even then, and even when I went back to visit, um, in a primary school, every child had to be able to cook, to fry an egg. And we think today, whoa, they will burn, etc., etc. But you know, those skills were taught there. Do you know every boy and every girl had to be able to sew a button on? And that was in a grade 4 class, by the way. Now, I'm talking about a long time ago, and I'm telling you it's still happening there. Yes, there are things we can do. But I had a principal, Austin Green Thompson, who always used to say, you know, comparisons are odious because they only serve to make you feel bad about yourself.
Bad.
And our context demands that we do certain things.
Yes.
And who says that is right? Because we are only seeing the nice part of it. We are not seeing this length of the school day where children are at school almost 24/7. We are not seeing the fact that they are not really playing enough. And children must play. I don't want to knock anybody or any country or any cultural aspects. I'm saying we don't know the full story. So the comparisons are not the best. But for our own context, there are certain things we must demand, Lynette, not ask for, not hope and pray for, but demand. We must demand better for the most vulnerable of our society. Children, the disabled, and we haven't even touched on the disabled child. We haven't even
Special
touched on the
needs
child that is not even in this school, is
system.
not even given the chance to do poorly.
Mm, mm.
So, because the survey extended to children not in a learning program. Then, Lynette, and maybe that part of the closing also needs to be to say to people, all is not lost. Children do catch up. But the children who catch up are the children who have better abilities at times. So the child who is going to be your average and your battler is never going to catch up. That's the other sad part to it. And they will forever feel less. And they will dislike school. And they will want to leave school because their chances to even just feel I'm part of the gang was taken away.
I hear you.
I also want to say to parents, everybody can do something, but teachers is where my one focus has to be, to say the better our teacher corps, the more equipped our schools are, the better off everyone will be.
You know, now it begs the question whether our teaching programs have kept up with the changes and the needs of societies, of school-going children, and of the workforce going forward. If it's adapted, but that is a discussion that I'm going to invite you to, that we can thrash out on another time. Why does this conversation matter today, Basil?
Lynette, our children are here with us now. There are children falling behind today. There are children whose life chances are being changed for the worse because we are not attending to it. So it matters at this moment, this very minute matters. We cannot leave it till tomorrow, and everybody has a part to play in this.
Basil, thanks so much for chatting to me this morning. We obviously going to watch and take some of these notes for another discussion that I'll invite you to when we talk about teachers, but definitely an invitation for parents also to respond. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. I'll see you soon. And as I say goodbye to Basil Manuel, he's the executive director of NAPTOSA, and we were talking about this Thrive by 5 index of 2024. It's been done 3 years prior to this recent one last year. And we were talking about some of the key findings and NAPTOSA's recommendations. But what we want to do is take this conversation further. So if you are listening to this on the replay, or you have been sitting in the chat and you are sharing this, please share it with a teacher, particularly those teachers involved in early development care, those particular programs, or parents who are considering and thinking about this, thinking about where and what do I do with my grade R child that has to be in grade R, and how do I make those choices? Some of their concerns, please share the show with them, because I'd like to invite you to either in the comments or send me a mail and become a part of the conversation, because it is definitely a bigger conversation that needs to be had. We need to talk about the training of teachers. We need to talk about whether that has kept up and been amended and adjusted to prepare not only our children, but prepare our parents for the way children learn and the changes, because the way we learned at school has changed. What our children are exposed to have changed. Their opportunities have changed. So what are we doing as a society to prepare them? And do we know what it takes to make sure that they not only are school ready, but they are life ready? Because that's a different conversation. So I do want to talk to teachers and invite you to become part of a bigger conversation and a different show that we talk about and focus on that. Sorry if I'm short of breath. I'm recovering from a cold. And then we do need to talk about parents, about what they have experienced, how they have seen, if at all, their children falling behind or actually growing and thriving, and where they feel the changes. Government also and educational departments need to come on board. A very important point that Basil made: in South Africa, for example, the Department of Education is one department, and then social development is a different department. And maybe we should stop working in silos, that we can see how can the one carry and support the needs of the other. Because one thing that this survey also highlighted was the fact that poverty amplifies the disadvantage. And how can you learn if you are hungry? So it's a bigger conversation. This was literally just the union's response to this, and I needed to hear his thoughts. But if you know someone who's a teacher or who's involved with early development, please share this show with him so that we can hear their thoughts, if they want to share their thoughts, of course. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking the discussion. Just know that whatever you like and whatever you share and whenever you comment, it really allows the algorithm to share the show to a wider audience, an audience that's obviously involved, interested, and effective. So have a fabulous Wednesday. I'm going to work on my recovery just so that I don't feel like I'm coughing through every conversation. Thanks for your time. Have a lovely Wednesday. I'll see you soon.